Welcome back to What Do You Know with Nick and Devin. I'm Devin.
And I'm Nick.
And today's episode is going to be our first two-parter episode.
Bam, bam,
Air
bam.
horn,
That's so
air horn.
exciting.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
So we're obviously recording part 1 today. Part 2 will be coming at a later date.
Yes.
And it is obviously all surrounding one topic.
It's actually 18 different topics rolled into 2 parts.
And I decided to make this one a two-parter because I feel like it is such a bigger topic, and I kind of want to play with you with it a little bit.
Okay.
And I learned from my past mistakes
Okay.
of taking such huge topics and trying to cram it all into one. And
Always your downfall.
It is, though. I get so excited about all this information and learning and teaching that I'm just like, let's just go for it. Come on, we can fit it in an hour. It's fine. Hour 10 doesn't matter.
It's fine.
It's fine. But this episode's going to be two-parter. Both are probably going to be an hour long.
Is it more birds? Is it just an extension of
There are so many birds we have to talk about.
So it's just a recording of us playing with your Merlin app.
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
This is what an eagle sounds like. This is what a common sparrow sounds like.
Get ready, everyone.
I want to create, you know those old toys where you pulled the lever and it spun a wheel and it said the cow goes. I'm gonna do that, but just a bunch of different birds.
I knew it before you said it. Saw it coming.
And that's how we become a millionaire.
Can't wait for your kids to have a toy like that. You're super great.
Yeah. Speaking of, kind of, not children.
Okay.
Your childhood. Again? It's a more happier note, but like what?
Okay. Great. Perfect.
A rare happy moment for your childhood.
Surprise.
What games did you play when you were a kid? Like card games or board games?
Oh, interesting. This is actually interesting because Brian, my husband, his family is very into board games.
Yeah.
Very into board games. And we just weren't that family.
Okay.
We just didn't really play a lot of board games.
Yeah.
And like growing up, it was often like me, my brother, and my cousin.
You're right.
And we just kind of like, I don't know, like played outside or like sticks or like, I don't know. We didn't really like have a lot of things. However,
Yeah.
there used to be this place, in Brookfield that my dad, we would get pizza from. I don't remember what it was called. It turned into a Thai place. But they would also have something called beer nuggets, which is basically like fried dough.
Yeah.
And we would always go there. We would order the pizza while we were there. And then we would sit in like they had a very small like cafe. And you would sit there and we would play chess.
Oh, okay.
And that was fun.
Yeah.
Because then I learned how to play chess.
Right.
And I never won. But because I was the youngest one.
Yeah.
And it was my dad and my brother. And they're like, you're so good at chess. And I was like, smarter than you, okay? I just am not good at chess. It's fine. So we played that. And like sometimes checkers. My grandmother used to have a bridge club that would come by the house.
Yeah.
Never learned how to play bridge.
No.
But that is a thing.
Okay.
And now we play mahjong sometimes.
Oh, that's fun.
And you put the tiles together.
Yeah, I remember playing Mahjong on the computer.
Yes, very different than mahjong in real life, because that's what I thought.
Oh.
But you know how on the computer you just kind of like match?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not how you play
Oh,
mahjong.
shit.
I know. I was just like, oh.
Right.
I was like, this is going to be such an easy game. I was like, I know how to do
great
this.
at matching.
Right. Got a mouse I can click?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's that.
Okay, yeah. I would kind of similar myself, I'd say. We had I think I played more games than you did. My grandma taught me how to play Chinese checkers. That one's really fun.
Yeah. With the marbles, right?
Yeah, and you're playing on like a star shape. I think it's like a 6-pointed star.
Yeah.
That one was really cool to learn how to play. Chutes and Ladders, Candyland.
Sure. Yeah.
Clue. I was awful at Clue. And then my grandparents actually gave my brother a game from their basement. It was called 221B Baker Street, which is the address for Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
And you essentially played Clue, but you were Sherlock Holmes. And like you had to go to the Scotland Yard and like all this other. It was like an advanced version of Clue, which was like oh, I'm even worse at this game.
Perfect.
Yeah. Really cool concept for a game. I was terrible at as a kid.
I think I also just like didn't have the patience for certain games.
Fair.
Like, I mean, like, don't get me wrong. Like, of course, like I've played Sorry or Life or we just didn't play them a lot, right?
Yeah.
What the fuck's Mastermind?
I'll tell you later.
Okay.
It's really cool. You essentially, it's like Wordle, but you have to guess. Like one person is the mastermind, and they have behind like a hood a pattern of colors for marbles, and then you, the other player, has X amount of chances to guess the right pattern of colors, and like they'll tell you how many you got right or wrong.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, it's like Wordle but with colors.
I don't have the patience. Like with chess, it was so like your move, my move, your move. So you're like constantly in it.
Chess is one of the most patient games in the world.
I don't know. I think there's more like you have to be patient, but it's also just like faster. It's like more. You're constantly active.
Okay.
Whereas with like Sorry or Chutes and Ladders or Candyland, you're like, okay, your turn.
Yeah.
Okay, you roll the dice. Okay, you move. I'm like, nothing happened in the past like 7 rounds. Like, what the fuck are we doing here?
You're gonna love my topic for today then.
Is it Chutes and Ladders?
Shoots and Ladders.
Just 2 parts of how Chutes and Ladders came to be.
Well, it was originally called Snakes and Ladders.
Yikes. Okay, I'm excited.
All right, so what do you know about Dungeons and Dragons?
Oh, shit.
We're getting into it.
Really not a lot. I know that it is a role-playing game. I know that
You just learned what an RPG stood for
yesterday. Thank you, yesterday. It is an RPG. There's a dungeon master. A lot of it's just like, I want to do this, and then you roll a dice. Okay, again, I know nothing about this, so this is what I think.
Yeah.
You roll some like crazy dice.
Yeah.
And you're like, did it happen? And it's like, maybe, I don't know. And then the dungeon master's like, yeah, you get 10,000 survival points, or you went to the woods, or you whatever. And then it takes forever. It's called campaigns.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're throwing out some good words.
And you've tried to get me to play it, and I tiptoe around that every time. That's all I know.
All right. Well, you're about 50% accurate.
Yes. Score.
All right. So this episode is mostly going to be about the origins of the D&D game.
Okay.
So that's what we're going to get into. Part 2 is going to be more of a breakdown of the game.
Got it.
Itself.
I thought you were going to say, in part 2, we're going to play the game. And I'm just like, I don't think I need to be here for the recording of part 2.
It's going to be a whole campaign.
Yeah,
It's going to be like 12
Strap in, y'all. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to get into the origins of D&D, where it came from. And it was actually, surprisingly, created here in the Midwest. Not anywhere near Chicago. It was kind of like the Wisconsin, Minnesota area. And it was created by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson.
Okay.
And for those of you who don't know, D&D, Dungeons & Dragons, is a fantasy tabletop RPG, or a TTRPG.
That's what I always say.
There it is. Like I said, designed by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, and it was first published in 1974 by Tactical Studies Rules Incorporated, or TSR, from here on out.
Got it. Okay.
So we're not going very far back in time, only 1974. Yeah. So this game was inspired by a very popular game type, which were miniature war games.
Okay.
And D&D, the first edition, the first version of D&D, inspired by those and used modified rules of this game called Chainmail as the initial rule set.
Got it, like chainmail?
Yeah.
Chainmail?
Chainmail, like what someone would wear, but the game was called Chainmail, which was a medieval miniature war game created by Gary Gygax and a different person, Jeff Perrin.
Okay.
So miniature war games, for those of who are unaware, I wasn't until me as well. Yeah. I never played miniature war games, but I'm pretty sure I had some things to play them with.
Okay.
That I like inherited from people like cleaning out their old basement and stuff like that.
Perfect.
But these miniature war games are essentially, you have these figurines on a large game board.
Okay.
and you could have these figures and potentially model buildings as well, to simulate large battles. So typically the miniatures would be a 1-20 scale. So one figurine, one soldier would represent 20 people in an army.
Got it. Feels like Risk. Does that make sense? No.
Yeah, essentially.
Okay.
But not on a global scale. But like where with Risk, you would have one piece representing, this is like a whole cavalry or whatever.
Got it.
It would be this one figurine. You're on one battlefield instead of a global scale.
I've never played Risk.
What a great example to bring up then. But yeah, similar to Risk, but on a smaller scale.
Okay, got it.
So while these war games were very popular within a certain community, and everyone was really excited to play these simulations of these giant battles, Dave Arneson wanted a little bit more of an individual soldier experience, a little bit more personal to one soldier as opposed to one army.
Got it.
And he wanted to play them in a medieval setting. So Dave Arneson, to create this individual soldier experience, used a variation of the Bronstein games, which were created by David Wesley and then later revised by Dave Arneson. There's a lot of Daves. It's the Midwest.
A lot of Daves. Yeah.
I'm always going to be using their last name. Just be like, this is who we're talking about. When there are a million Daves. Too many Daves is a common phrase. And so the Bronstein games started out as a Napoleonic war game in the Napoleonic era, set in a fictional German town of Bronstein. So not a real town. And it was a multiplayer, multi-objective game where each player was assigned a role in the town of Bronstein. So you'd have a mayor, you'd have a butcher, etc. Whatever you needed in the town. Yeah, butcher, baker, and a candlestick maker.
Thank you. I was like, we're right there.
Important parts in the town.
Very much so.
And everyone was really enjoying this game. And while not an initial part of the game, players started to role play with each other in character. And that's how they traveled around town as their characters, and like we're discussing issues in their town as their characters instead of as players.
So like method acting.
Essentially, yeah, they really got into it. They loved this role-playing aspect of the game.
Okay.
And again, it wasn't initially part of it. It was just like you're supposed to talk through a referee, and then that's how you're going to act through the town instead of you yourself being like, I'm going to go talk to the mayor as the candlestick maker.
Got it. I just also imagine like everyone sitting around and like the next day they all get together and some guy's like making candles in the corner. Someone's like cutting.
They get really into it, right? And it got to the point where they had to kind of like come up on the fly of combat rules because they weren't expecting to have to deal with that.
Yeah.
But then throughout the role playing, someone was like, I want to duel this person. And so like, this is how we do it. And so eventually Dave Arneson wound up using the chainmail system to resolve combat. Because like chainmail had rules for combat. And then later on, Arneson was like, okay, so let's add more details to this game. People are really into the role-playing. We have combat rules now. What about character class, experience points, level advancement, armor class for when you are hit by something? Let's add all of these into our game.
Okay.
And so he was adding all of these innovations to this former Bronstein game. And eventually... after his old partner left for military service, Dave Arneson brought in Gary Gygax.
Got it. What a last name.
Yes. It's like perfect for this fantasy medieval world. You already sound like a wizard. Like
Master Gygax.
Exactly. Yeah. Gygax the Wise. So Gary and Dave I think we're done with all these other Daves and
Thank
Dave. So
God.
we're gonna stick with the first name of Gary.
I need
and
to start
Dave.
getting like little figurines and be like, this one's Dave, and this
Right.
one's Dave.
So Gary and Dave then began developing and refining the rules for what at the time they called, quote, the fantasy game.
Okay.
Later on, this game was called Dungeons and Dragons, and it was supposedly decided by Gary's 2-year-old daughter. He was like, "Which name do you like better, sweetheart?" And she was like, "I like Dungeons and Dragons better." That was the rumor.
2-year-old?
Yeah, that was the rumor,
Jeez.
but supposedly Gary's wife at the time also had an influence on the name.
Just like, this clearly is better.
Right. So the main difference at the time between Dungeons and Dragons and previous war games were that players could create and control an individual character instead of a whole army. That was the main draw to D&D.
Got it. Okay.
Was like you have a more personal connection instead of just taking a step back, sending all of these people to a war and whatnot. You are controlling the fate of one person. You get more personal connection.
Okay.
So there was still a referee, like in war games, but this person is now called a dungeon master. And they also act as the story guide.
Got it. Okay.
And then the players, again, another difference would be having that personal touch. The players can then interact with the setting, explore, gather resources, experience, blah, blah, blah.
Got it.
And the influences that Gary and Dave took to create this world, because they liked the idea of having a medieval setting,
Yeah.
but they wanted to bring in fantasy aspects of it, have magic and whatnot.
Sure.
So they took a lot of influences from mythology, history, pulp fiction, not the movie.
I was like, this got dark really quickly.
Right, no,
yeah.
not the movie. Pulp fiction were old, quick published books.
Sorry, I'm imagining. The witch is ODing. The witch is ODing. Zed's dead, baby. Like, that's all I imagine.
That'd be hilarious.
That'd be amazing. Continue, sorry.
No, you're good.
Old fantasy books.
Yeah, Pulp Fiction were like old, quick published fantasy books, some almost magazines.
Oh, okay.
And the reason why they were called Pulp Fiction is because of the quality of paper they were printed on was so poor that it was like a pulpy piece of paper. Like the edges weren't refined, and like it felt grittier.
Yeah.
Compared to the other magazines, like the fashion magazines were on glossier, nicer paper. So that's why they're called Pulp Fiction.
That's kind of cool.
Little fun little trivia into there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, other influences came from contemporary fantasy novels, including Lord of the Rings and whatnot. To the point, actually, that Tolkien Enterprises threatened lawsuits against Gary and Dave for copyright issues for certain words in D&D.
Interesting.
So originally, you had races involved in D&D, like the Hobbit and Ent and Balrog. And so Hobbit is now had to be changed to Halfling, Ent had to be changed to Trent,
Okay.
and then Balrog had to be changed to Balor.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so
Right.
Tolkien Enterprises was like, hey, those were my original words
Right.
that you just stole. Change it.
I also love that they were like, yeah, we'll change it. Only slightly.
Right.
Ent is Trent. Like,
Right.
Come on.
But that's enough for those court
That's
of law.
enough. Yeah, it's fair.
So they combined these bits and pieces from all of these different sources into one system. So they took the, like the Halfling and the Trent from those stories, but then they also took how wizards use spells in certain stories.
Okay.
Especially wizards using spells was heavily influenced by the Dying Earth stories and novels by Jack Vance, of how wizards need to daily memorize their spells so that they can use them, and then the next day they'll have to memorize them again and whatnot.
Which, side note,
Yeah.
if there's a certain type of magic that you could use today, what would it be? Like, in the sense of, like, Harry Potter is, like, wands, and the more you master, you don't have to, like, say the spell.
Right.
Or, like, magicians, where it's, like, a lot of, like, hand and, like, ritual and stuff like that. Like, or like charmed where they have powers? Like, what would you use?
I mean, probably what I'm most familiar with would be Dungeons and Dragons magic.
Which is,
well,
we'll get into it.
Yeah, briefly, there are 3 different core magic users.
Okay.
There are wizards, sorcerers, and warlocks.
Got it. No mages? Are mages magic people?
Mages are magic. Like, mage is just another name for a magic user.
Got it. Okay.
And I think I would like to be a sorcerer because they just inherently know good like they inherently know magic. They don't have to study it. They just like, oh, I got powers.
Just like that.
Exactly.
Okay, that's fair. That makes sense.
Yeah. How about you?
I think I want to do. I would like to just like kind of be able to do magic. Like it's just an extension of thought or extension of yourself. But I also like don't mind like the magician's magic. Have you watched The Magicians at all?
I keep thinking you're talking about like street magic.
Absolutely not.
And like Vegas.
No. The Magicians is books.
Okay.
But then they turned it into a TV series. I think you would like it. But it's basically like they take kind of like this Narnia-esque world, and it's like this guy who like loves those stories, and then they realize it's real, and then he becomes a magician, and it's a lot of like ritual based or a lot of like hand movement stuff or like things like that.
That's cool.
And it's kind of cool, and it starts to like integrate also like Reynard the Fox and like different like mythical things, and it's fun.
That's cool.
Yeah, the world's cool. You should.
Yeah. There's that just reminded me of this book series. I only read the first one so far. Well, the first book is called The Nightmare Arcanist.
Okay.
I don't know the book series title, but it's just that's the name of the first book, and it's very it's more of like a younger audience story.
Okay.
But the way that they get magic is only a few people are selected to able to control magic, and they're selected by these magical creatures essentially.
Okay.
Choose like, you're worthy, your character is worthy. I'm going to partner with you, and through this partnership, you're going to gain powers because I'm going to let you use some of my magic.
Oh.
And so depending on the creature that chooses you, that determines your type of magic that you can use. So like in this story, the main character comes from an island where the phoenix is the creature that chooses people, and like the phoenix magic is supposed to be really powerful because they have fire and healing powers, obviously. But like if you were chosen by a phoenix, then like I can use magic and all that stuff. It's kind of cool concept.
That's cool.
Yeah,
it's a little like Avatar-y.
Avatar-y, like or, almost like Percy Jackson, kind of like, my parents determine my powers.
Or what is it? It was like new to like Wheel of Time, I think it's called.
Oh, okay.
On Amazon. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Anyway, continue.
Great.
Sorry.
Back to Dungeons and Dragons. So since this game was created in 1974, it has obviously gone through a lot of revisions and additions.
Yeah.
Currently, it is on the 5th edition.
Oh, really? Only?
There was a long period of time before it got to be the 3rd, like between the original creation and the 3rd edition was like 30 years.
Oh, okay. Got it.
So I started playing Dungeons and Dragons during 3rd edition. It might have been either 3E or 3.5 in the early 2000s.
Got it.
So that's how long I've been playing.
Quite a long time.
And each edition almost always comes with the 3 core books, which are the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Monster Manual. So you'll always kind of see those 3. Player's Handbook has all the basic rules. Dungeon Master's Guide has tips and tricks for you to be a dungeon master.
Okay.
And then Monster Manual has all the stats for all the creatures that you can come across during your adventure.
Heard. Okay.
So each new edition was meant to fix any additions from the previous edition. So this sometimes, though, caused a rift among some players when they preferred one edition over the other. So they were like, I like this aspect of edition 2 rather than what they presented in edition 3.
Oh.
So, for example, Dieter Bond for The Verge in 2014 wrote, quote, The third edition got a reputation, which it didn't necessarily deserve, for being too complex and rules-focused. The fourth edition got a reputation, which it didn't necessarily deserve, for being too focused on miniatures and grids, too mechanical.
Okay.
So then the fifth edition was later brought in, and it was designed to bring D&D back to its roots, and bring people back who left to play other TTRPGs like Pathfinder. They wanted to simplify it a little bit more open to creative license while you're playing.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
So, like I said, the original game was published in 1974.
Yes.
With a small box set with 3 booklets: the Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, Monster Manual.
Got it. What else is needed? We'll get into that. Sorry.
Nothing really.
Oh, okay.
You can add a lot more.
Okay.
But to start and play the game, you don't really need much else.
Did you ever dress up in character when playing?
Once.
Yeah.
But I didn't like dress up. My most recent campaign that I finished a little bit ago, my character smoked an enchanted cigar. And so I bought a prop cigar to use when we played in person.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Great.
Good old Marlowe.
Good old. That was their character's name?
Yeah.
Do you get to name your character?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, fun.
You get to do anything you want with. Like, you can create your character however you want to.
See, you liked improv.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was your whole thing.
Yeah.
It is. Not like that's all there is about you. I'm just saying, like, you just enjoy.
I am a one-sided piece of paper.
I am improv. I can't. I mean, like, I can, but, like, I just prefer not to.
Wow.
But, I mean, that's fun. Like, the creative licensing is fun.
Right.
That's good. Anyway, continue.
So, 1974 originally published 3 small books. The production budget was only $2,000.
Oh, my God.
With only 100 of that 2,000 being budgeted for artwork, which is insane.
That's crazy.
So it was very amateurish looking, obviously, from that. But it was grabbed onto like hotcakes. 1,000 copies were sold in the first year, but then after that, 3,000 were sold in 1975 and just continued to grow from there.
That's crazy.
So it was very, at first it was very popular among war gamers who were used to playing this kind of stuff.
Sure.
More familiar with the style of game, but then it quickly expanded popularity to a more general audience, especially high schoolers and college students as well.
Okay.
By 1981, there were over 3 million players worldwide.
Jeez.
So in less than 10 years, in just like 6 years, 7 years, blew up from 1,000 copies being sold to 3 million players.
That's crazy, especially for like a paper version. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
just a paper-based game. There might have been figurines at this time too.
Right. But it's not like even like a board game where it's just like, oh, like I can take. You know what I mean? Like it just there's more involvement and more creativity. Like it's just that's crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
And a little bit more complex rules than just playing like Monopoly.
Right.
So in 1984, 750,000 copies were being sold each year at that point.
Damn.
Crazy. So, like I said, it blew up to a more general audience, like college and high school students. Now we're going to get into the controversies of Dungeons and Dragons.
Controversies?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there was, as some of you might be familiar with, in the 80s, Christian groups really hated Dungeons and Dragons.
This is like Satanic Panic.
Exactly.
Time. Yeah, that's fair.
So the Satanic Panic was a huge part of D&D history because these Christian groups claimed that the game promoted Satanism, suicide, and murder.
Oh my God.
Right. A lot of shit going on. I mean, like, the same thing happened with Harry Potter when that came out in the 2000s, whatnot.
Dark magic.
Exactly. All that bullshit.
Yeah.
So these religious groups claimed that the game was a recruitment tool for the Satanic Church. So they were even upset at the drawings depicted in the books that were provided. Because some of them had naked female humanoids depicted in them from like the harpies, succubi.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like not humans or like those creatures, but like they were demons with their tits out.
You know what I love more than anything?
Yeah.
Just a couple of demons with a TikTok.
Who doesn't like
how
that?
freeing.
Free the nip, damn
Right.
it.
Live your life.
And so there were so many complaints that TSR, who still owned the game at the time, removed many of these issues when they were released for the second edition, including like getting rid of those drawings or covering them up and removing the word demon and stuff like that from the game entirely. But later these things were reinstated once the third edition was released.
I was gonna say, way to like fold under pressure. Like, come on.
Right. Bullshit.
Jesus. Right.
So the panic and controversy over this game, because of all the satanic panic and whatnot, actually drove sales up because of the Streisand effect. Which the Streisand effect, another little fun fact, droplet in here, is an attempt to hide, remove, or censor information. When an attempt to hide, remove, or censor information backfires and draws more attention to that information.
Oh.
And it was, this term was coined in 2003.
Okay.
Because of Barbra Streisand attempted to suppress California Coastal Records Project's photograph of her cliff-top residence in Malibu, California. And so her trying to hide that photo and all this information brought more attention to it.
Yeah. Okay.
So D&D was also went through the Streisand effect, and it became like an act of rebellion to buy and play the game. And like it's the 80s, punk is at like its highest point. Everyone's like, fuck the system, fuck the man. We're gonna play Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
And like everyone else was kind of like worried, like, oh, of course, like demons and stuff like, but also like drug use and a disconnect with reality was another worry that people had about people who were playing the game. So these accusations of the game were mainly during the 80s, and then slowly were still happening, but were slowly fizzling out up until about the 2010s.
Okay.
There's not a lot of issue with the game on that sense, at least.
Sure.
The other controversy that is still going on today for this game is that parts of the game were and still are racist and insensitive. Yeah.
2023, man. Come on.
Yeah. Also,
it's a fantasy world. Like
created by two white guys.
That's fair. I was gonna say,
in the
like,
70s.
You really have to think about being racist and anyway in fantasy. You know what I mean? Like you created this anyway.
You created it. Why aren't you creating a perfect society? Because I don't know.
Because also, like, if inherently you think, that
exactly.
Makes sense. Okay, we're there.
So the treatment of marginalized and underrepresented races underrepresented races were a big issue. Still are. So like typically the darker skinned races, such as the orcs and the drow, which are dark elves, and like all of in that this is going to be terrible if you're saying the people in that group
way to go.
Right. Tend to always be considered evil and inherit a lot of prejudices from the real world placed on people of color, to the point where even they gave certain races like the orcs an intelligence stat penalty. So if you chose to play as an orc, you would automatically get a minus like 1 or 2 to your intelligence stat. So you're considered dumber.
That's so okay. The elves thing I get, because like the elves are a little more humanoid.
Yeah. And
like a darker, like a representation. I think like you make the connection there and like the projection.
Yeah.
But like, I think in my head, like all I'm thinking of when you say orcs is Lord of the Rings. So I'm just like, that tracks.
Exactly, though, because orcs written by Tolkien were meant to be this horrible race of people, of creatures. Like he was projecting his own real world stuff on it.
I guess fair. I also was just like, you were born from like the mud, so.
Well, that's Tolkien.
Right. Not the same.
Yeah.
But I get it. I get the connection.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense.
Because the game, like many other fantasy in this fantasy genre pieces, had a Eurocentrism point of view.
Yeah.
So you had the white man's view of the world, where a lot of the depictions of the heroes and stuff like that were white male humans.
Yep. That makes sense.
And or white wood elves. Like every quote unquote good person wasn't a person of color.
Look at the movie. It's Chris Pine.
Exactly. So that's always been an underlying issue.
Okay.
And we kind of thought we were moving past it. But then 2022
so recent.
is one of the most recent issues with the game.
Yeah.
Was when a source book is essentially an extra book to provide more information, more stories, etc. So a source book called Spelljammer: Adventures in Space. I was really excited for it to have all of these space adventures.
Okay.
They included in that book a race called the Hadozi.
Okay.
And these folks were primate-like creatures that reinforced racist themes and ideas against black people due to their association with in-game slavery.
No.
So you have this whole new setting of space and space adventures to go on, and you have these similar like masted-like ships that we have sailing the seas back in the day. You're sailing in space, and they still have, and you can make the connections here of primate-like folk, another racist thing towards black people, being slaves on these ships.
No one in 2022 was like, hey, that's probably not the best idea.
Yeah. And I'm going to get into this a little bit later because they are supposed to have cultural consultants.
Just like a DEI program would be great.
Yeah, they're supposed to have implemented cultural consultants, but no consultant was listed for the publication of Spelljammer. And so, like, obviously everyone on the internet was like, the fuck?
Right.
Like, it's such an easy dot to connect.
Like, you didn't even try to hide it.
No.
You're like, well, now is my time to shine.
Right.
That's racist.
So, at this point in time, Wizards of the Coast owns D&D.
Okay.
They issued an apology in September of that year and has since removed that content from all digital production or all digital publications and future prints. So if you have an original copy of a physical copy of the book, you'll still have all that information, but they'll no longer print it in future copies.
Got it.
And they've removed it from online.
Got it.
But still.
Jeez, I don't understand like why it took outcry to even have that happen. Like, how did there's so much time and so many people involved, like whether they had a cultural consultant on it or whatever it might be, you're telling me over the thousands of people that it's gone through, from production to story to graphic to all of that, nobody was like, hey, by the way, you're having ape-like humanoid creatures be slaves to a majority white race?
Right.
Nobody.
Here we are.
Jesus.
They issued an apology.
Wow, thanks.
Yeah. And while that is a really big issue that should have not happened.
Correct.
For the most part, Wizards of the Coast is trying to fix a lot of these issues that they've kind of inherited.
When did Wizards of the Coast take over?
That was my next point of information. So Wizards bought TSR in 1997 and has since published D&D.
Oh, okay.
So they've had it for 26 years.
Yeah.
In 2019, and when I say like Wizards of the Coast is like fixing these issues, it's mostly recent that they're trying to fix all this stuff.
Got it.
And I think it started in 2019. I'm not too sure.
Okay.
But in 2019, a source book named Eberron: Rising from the Last War was published, and this removed the intelligence penalty stat and, quote, menacing trait from the orc racial stats, and among other things. So they took that penalty stat that was racist and whatnot, and among other things, they removed all those things that were like, this isn't great.
Right.
In 2020, another source book called Tasha's Cauldron of Everything added optional character creation rules with updated racial rules. So you're now allowed to change your racial ability score, bonuses to better fit and customize your character. So like when you're creating a character, usually like, for example, if you're creating a dwarf character, they'll have like a +2 constitution because they're sturdy, they're stout. Yeah. But you're able to change that up. If you still wanted to play a dwarf, but you didn't want to be this stout, sturdy person, you wanted to be a more charismatic dwarf or whatever, you can put your racial stat into there.
Oh. You know what's interesting is that it's interesting that it was like 2019, 2020 where they'd really started to change things, because I think before that, like taking on the company in 1997, like then you have kind of like, I'm thinking like politically, like you have the Bush administration, but a lot of that administration after like 9/11 kind of becomes this like very American, we're just focused on that sort of thing.
Right.
And then you have the Obama era, and a lot of people were like, oh, we solved racism because we have a black president. And everyone's like, well, that's not how that works. But like you kind of suppress this aspect of racism because of that, at least in the eyes of a majority of, you know, the predominantly white society.
Right.
And then 2019, 2020, you start to have this insurgence of racial biases and topics, and of course all the social injustice movement and all of that. And so then you all of a sudden have companies being like, oh fuck, like we can't
to like look at this shit,
right, because we don't have someone to just like fall back on. We don't have this kind of whatever. And so then it's all of a sudden people are starting to take action, and like you start to see the parallels of being like, oh yeah, of course in 2019, 2020 you were like, we should probably try.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Oh. So then going forward, like I said, Wizards of the Coast is now including a cultural consultant. They're supposed to be doing it along every step of the process when creating new content.
Yeah.
Something happened with Spelljammer. I don't know. But this actually created another source book called Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel. And this one's really cool. I've actually played with this one a little bit. This one was released in 2022, and they utilized multiple non-white authors depicting tales relating to more African and Asian focused cultures and mythologies and stories from their own culture are incorporated into this new source book. And it's a really fascinating and beautiful book to like look at all the art, because art is also related to those cultures.
That's cool.
So yeah, I was really excited to see that come out from them. So like I said, Wizards of the Coast bought TSR in 1997, and they're responsible for the 3rd edition, which was the biggest adjustment to the rules since the creation of the game.
Got it.
That was released in 2000, and then revised and re-released as version 3.5 in 2003. From there, in 2008, the 4th edition was released in hopes to make the game faster, more intuitive, fix other issues, and provide that were provided through feedback obtained from the community. And then on the 40th anniversary of D&D in 2014, the 5th edition was released.
Aha, okay.
And so the 5th edition has been a huge boost to D&D popularity. This edition made the game less strict while giving the players the freedom to play their own game or follow a predetermined story. These are things I've kind of touched on a little bit before. And year over year, though, since the release of the 5th edition, there's been an increase in players.
Got it.
And this is in part to shows like Critical Role, Dimension 20, Stranger Things, which has broadened the access and popularity of D&D. And then you also have online tools like D&D Beyond, Roll20, which have made it easier to play.
Like across the world?
Yeah, because during the pandemic, people weren't really able to get together with their D&D groups, so they used those online tools. And the virtual play had increased by 86%.
Oh my god!
Which is insane.
Yeah. Is it still pretty high?
Yeah.
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 That makes sense.
I mean, because like you have like Twitch streams, Discord groups of and even like on Reddit of being able to find online groups to play with if you're looking for it.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
So D&D remains the best known and best selling tabletop RPG in the United States.
Yeah.
2017 had the most players in its history, with a jump from 12 million to 15 million.
Oh my god.
Fucking insane.
That's nuts.
And the creation of this game is actually responsible for many modern adventure video games. Because the nerds who were playing D&D were also developing computer programs. And so they wanted to have a digital experience of D&D. So they initially created these text-based games where it would give you a prompt and you would be able to say something into the computer and it'd read it back to you. And it used the D20 rolling of the dice rule system from Dungeons and Dragons. And even today, many of these video games use the same dice rolling chance system that Dungeons and Dragons utilized.
Okay.
And also the RPG part of that system of having the intelligence check, the strength check, etc.
Sure.
So that is the history and legacy of Dungeons and Dragons. All the fun and terrible parts. I mean, there are a lot other things going on with the game. There are a lot of other issues going on with the game, but that's the main part of it.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I'm surprised, I guess just with the kind of what's what I'm looking for? Ignorance that I have towards D&D.
Yeah.
I'm just surprised with 15 million users worldwide.
It's huge.
Well, just because it's not just a straightforward game.
No.
Do you know what I mean? And of course the next you'll get into all
I do
of
know
that.
What I mean.
Yeah. But it's just there's no clear cut, this is when we start and this is when we end and it's going to take us an hour. You know what I mean? It can. I feel you said stories of oh yeah, my campaign's still going. I was well, didn't that start 3 months ago? You know what I mean? You just keep going and going and going and you can do that.
I think the longest campaign had been going on for 30 years or something like that.
See, that's nuts. And that's where I'm just it just because there is so much creativity and freedom to kind of do things, it does allow you to kind of escape into a world in a little bit more of a personal way versus just I'm going to be Mr. Fudge in Candyland or whatever. Right. You know what I mean? Right. I don't think that's the case.
Well, it's really cool too because D&D is really popular in the LGBTQ plus community because people are able to express themselves and play someone without the shackles of today's society. Someone can explore their gender identity by playing a character who's not the same gender as they are in society at the moment. And so they can explore all of these feelings and try out all of these new identities that they might not be able to in real life. And I think that's a really cool part of the game.
Totally. I mean, I didn't even realize that about my own community. So
well,
thank you.
There you go.
I appreciate that. Look at me expanding horizons. Well, thanks, Dev.
Yeah.
That's fun. Okay, it's good background. And then we'll see how this filters into the next episode.
Absolutely.
Part 2.
Yeah, part 2. Our first 2-parter.
All right. Well, thanks, Dev. Everyone, make sure you subscribe, do all the good things. Make sure you can find us on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at WhatDoYouKnow_podcast. And on the Tweeters at WDYK_podcast. Let us know what you want to hear about in the future. Send us some comments, some ways we can interact with you moving forward, and we look forward to it.
Absolutely. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Yeah. All right. Have a good rest of your day, Devin. I'll see you soon.
Okay.
Bye.